Hello, everyone. Welcome to Focus on Christ podcast, episode number 8. So thankful that you're here today. I'm super excited about what I'm going to be talking to you about today, and I hope you're excited too, and I hope you stay tuned in until the very end. I wanted to make sure I share a couple things with you before we get started today. I want to make sure that you've been over to our Facebook page. I want to make sure you've been to our Instagram page and that you've checked out our website, focusonchrist.com. If you haven't done those things, when this podcast is over, just go ahead on over there and check those out. Make sure you get on there and like our Facebook and like our Instagram in particular. So that you can stay current with everything that's coming out and all the new content that's coming in the very near future. And every single day I try and put something up there to help inspire you, to keep you motivated and keep your eyes on Christ as you go about your daily walk. Because that's what this is all about. If I can do nothing other than to bring Christ into the center of your life and the center of your focus every single day, then that's a win for me. And I'm super excited about that. And I love that I get to share some leadership principles with you, especially ones from one of my mentors, my favorite mentors in my life, John C. Maxwell. He's just been a big influence in my life, and I get to share some information from him today with you. So today we're going to be talking about the law of respect from the 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership, one of John C. Maxwell's many, many books. So this is the law of respect. And it goes, people naturally follow leaders stronger than themselves. People naturally follow leaders stronger than themselves. So the word respect has a lot of different meanings, and you can look at this a lot of different ways. Now, did I mention this is one of my favorite laws? All of them are, but this is one of my favorites because it's something that I probably had some challenges with in the past where I have just not done a good job, and so it really resonates with me quite a bit. So anyway, respect, the idea of respect can come into your mind in many different ways. We think about people we respect in our life because of things they have done, or people that they have helped, or how they've served, or because they're stronger, faster, and better than us in whatever capacity that might be that we're looking to them for that strength. So we look at respect for a lot of ways. But the idea here is that people naturally follow leaders stronger than themselves. So when we're looking at respect, it's kind of that upward, the eyes upward, kind of looking into when we look up at somebody when we respect. So when we think of leadership, it's often people that we look up to with respect. So we're going to look at that today from a biblical perspective. So I hope that you have your Bible handy. If you don't, you can just listen along, and I will do the best I can. Some of these Old Testament passages in particular are really challenging for me to read, and the variation of the Bible that I'm using is the New King James, and so I would say that it doesn't just flow off the tongue all the time. So I may be switching translations here before too long to something that's a little easier to read and a little easier to hear, because I want to make sure that I get these messages conveyed to you the best I can. So let's go ahead and get started. So today we're going to be starting in Judges chapter 4, verses 1 through 16. Judges chapter 4, verses 1 through 16. And this is the story of Deborah. It starts out, when Ehud was dead, the children of Israel again did evil in the sight of the Lord. Not off to a very good start here, are we? So then the Lord sold them into the hand of Jabin, king of Canaan, who reigned in Hazor. The commander of his army was Sisera, and he dwelt in Harosheth Hagoyim. And the children of Israel cried out to the Lord, and Jabin had 900 chariots of iron, and for 20 years he had harshly oppressed the children of Israel. Now Deborah, a prophetess, the wife of Lapidoth, was judging Israel at the time, and she would sit under the palm tree of Deborah between Ramah and Bethel in the mountains of Ephraim. And the children of Israel came up for her judgment. Then she sent and called for Barak, the son of Abinoam, from Kadesh in Naphtali, and said to him, Has not the Lord God of Israel commanded, Go and deploy troops at Mount Tabor? Take with you 10,000 men of the sons of Naphtali, and with the sons of Zebulun, and against you I will deploy Sisera, the commander of Jabin's army, and his chariots and his multitude at the river Kishon, and I will deliver him into your hand. And Barak said to her, If you will go with me, then I will go. But if you will not go with me, I will not go. So she said, I will surely go with you. Nevertheless, there will be no glory for you in the journey you are taking. For the Lord will sell Sisera into the hand of a woman. Then Deborah rose and went with Barak to Kadesh. And Barak called Zebulun and Naphtali to Kadesh, where he went up with 10,000 men under his command, and Deborah went with him. Now Heber the Kenite of the children of Hobab, the father-in-law of Moses, had separated himself from the Kenites and pitched his tent near the terebinth tree at Zaanaim, which is beside Kadesh. And they reported to Sisera that Barak the son of Abinoam had gone up to Mount Tabor. So Sisera gathered together all his chariots, 900 chariots of iron, and all the people who were with him from Harosheth Hagoyim to the river Kishon. Then Deborah said to Barak, Up, for this is the day in which the Lord has delivered Sisera into your hand. Has not the Lord gone out before you? So Barak went down from Mount Tabor with 10,000 men following him. And the Lord routed Sisera and all his chariots and all his army with the edge of the sword before Barak. And Sisera alighted from his chariot and fled away on foot. But Barak pursued the chariots and the army as far as Harosheth Hagoyim, and all the army of Sisera fell before the edge of the sword. Not a man was left. I love the stories of the Old Testament. They paint such a graphic and colorful image of how God worked in the lives of his chosen people. And they're just amazing, amazing stories. I just really enjoy the stories here in the Old Testament in this section. I've just been through them in my daily Bible reading. It's just a lot of really good information here to think about and to look at. And so we're talking about the law of respect and how leaders are looked up to a lot, but we have to earn that position of respect, and we have to earn that position of trust with our people. And here we see the Barak is looking to Deborah, who is the judge over Israel at this particular time in history, and she has such a command of respect that Barak is just looking to her for leadership and for guidance and just for comfort in the coming battle, which is, in that culture, in that day and age, that's a kind of a big deal because there weren't a lot of powerful female leaders that we see. We see stories through the Old Testament where there's very strong female roles and very strong female leaders shown. We just last episode we talked about Queen Esther and the role that she played in saving the Jews from the hands of Haman. Here we see Deborah and the respect that she commands as the judge over all of Israel. And it talks about where she sat and how people came to her. She didn't go to them, they came to her. So there's this always looking up. But at some point, Deborah had to earn this. She had divine appointment from God. However, she also had by her effective and her good judgment over the course of time, she had earned the respect of the people. And in turn, they look up to her for her leadership. We're going to go over to Ruth chapter 1. If I can find it here. There we go. Ruth chapter 1. Verses 8 through 18. So Ruth chapter 1, verses 8 through 18. So it says, And Naomi said to her own two daughters-in-law, Go, return each to your own mother's house. The Lord deal kindly with you, as you have dealt with the dread and with me. The Lord grant that you might find rest, each in the house of her husband. So she kissed them, and they lifted up their voices and wept. And they said to her, Surely we will return with you to your people. But Naomi said, Turn back, my daughters. Why will you go with me? Are these still sons? Are there still sons in my womb that they may be your husbands? Turn back, my daughters, go, for I am too old to have a husband. If I should say I have, if I should say I have hope, if I should have a husband tonight and should also bear sons, would you wait for them till they were grown? Would you restrain yourselves from having husbands? This is an interesting. You don't want to just kind of gloss over this portion of the reading here. This paints a really powerful. There's just a lot going on here. We see that if we go back to the where this started, it says, and Naomi said to her two daughters-in-law. So if I'm remembering right, it's Naomi has lost her husband, and let's see. I believe Naomi's lost her husband, and so she has these two daughters-in-law. I'm trying to remember the whole story here. I apologize for not having it. But anyway, we'll stay right here, and I'll have to look up the backstory later to make sure I get it right. But it's you don't want to gloss over this, because this has to do with we're talking about leadership here, and we're talking about the law of respect. What Naomi is saying is that she's too old to have children, and then those children would have to grow to adulthood before they would be able to sire children for her two daughters-in-law. And that's, so you're talking a time period of maybe 20 to even maybe 30 or 40 years that these two daughters-in-law would have to go without being able to really carry on their roles that they were supposed to be serving as women at that particular time. And so Naomi's trying to talk them through this to get them to go back to and find husbands in a better location, and just to send them on their way. And so it's real important you kind of understand that there's this huge time component here, and that this law of respect is coming into play, and this is a big, big deal here. No, my daughter, let's see. Would you wait for them till they were grown? Would you restrain yourselves from having husbands? No, my daughters, for it grieves me very much that for your sakes that the hand of the Lord has gone out against me. And they lifted their voices and wept again, and Oprah kissed her mother-in-law, and Ruth clung to her. But Ruth clung to her. And she said, look, your sister-in-law has gone back to her people and to her gods. Return after your sister-in-law. But Ruth said, entreat me not to leave you, or to turn back from following after you. For wherever you go, I will go, and wherever you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God my God. Where you die, I will die, and there will I be buried. The Lord do so to me, and more also, if anything but death parts you and me. When she saw that she was determined to go with her, she stopped speaking to her. Can you imagine, just imagine in your own leadership journey, of if you had a group of people following you this devotedly. This is not something that you can command of somebody. This is not something you can request of somebody. This is something that has to come from the heart of the follower. And just what Ruth is doing here is just, it's what we all aspire to in our leadership journeys. We all wish and desire to have followers that are so devoted to our cause and so devoted to our leadership, not to us in particular, but to the mission and vision that God has called us to. We want people to come along behind us and to raise up and build up our, whatever our mission and vision is. Mine's focus on Christ and bringing leadership back to the church. I'm looking for people to come along behind me and be so devoted to that mission, so through me to that mission, and to love God in such a way that they can get behind that mission. Just, man, it's so hard to imagine someone being so devoted to you the way Ruth was to Naomi here in this story here. There's this poem that's just really just brings home how the concept of the law of respect, that Ruth was looking to Naomi for that leadership, and she just writes out this whole poem here in recognition of that. It's just really powerful. Let's go over to 2 Samuel now, chapter 15. So we're going to read through 2 Samuel chapter 15. This is a little longer reading, just so you know. It says, after this happened, the Absalom provided himself with chariots and horses and 50 men to run before him. Now Absalom would rise early and stand before the way to the gate. So it was, whenever anyone who had a lawsuit came to the king for his decision, that Absalom would call to him and say, what city are you from? And he would say, your servant is from such and such a tribe of Israel. Then Absalom would say to him, look, your case is good and right, but there is no deputy of the king to hear you. Moreover, Absalom would say, oh, that I were made judge in the land, and everyone who has any suit or cause would come to me. Then I would give him justice. And so it was, whenever anyone came to bow down to him, that he would put out his hand and take him and kiss him. In this manner Absalom acted toward all Israel who came to the king for judgment. So Absalom stole the hearts of the men of Israel. So this is where Absalom begins to David has forgiven Absalom, and now Absalom is standing at the city gates, and he's diverting all of the foot traffic, you might say, that would normally go to King David to have something resolved, and he's diverting that, and he's pulling people into his own tribe here. Now it came to pass after 40 years that Absalom said to the king, please, let me go to Hebron to pay the vow which I made to the Lord. For your servant took a vow while I dwelt in Geshur in Syria, saying, if the Lord indeed brings me back to Jerusalem, that I will serve the Lord. And the king said to him, go in peace. So he rose and went to Hebron. Then Absalom sent spies throughout all the tribes of Israel, saying, as soon as you hear the sound of the trumpet, then you shall say, Absalom reigns in Hebron. And with Absalom went 200 men invited from Jerusalem, and they were along and they went along innocently and did not know anything. Then Absalom sent for Ahithophel, the Gilonite, David's counselor, from his city, from Gilah, while he offered sacrifices, and the conspiracy grew strong, for all the people with Absalom continually increased in number. So Absalom's just ultimate treachery here, where he's just calling all the people from David, and he's basically conducting a coup operation here. It says, now a messenger came to David, saying, the hearts of the men of Israel are with Absalom. So David said to all his servants who were with him at Jerusalem, arise, let us flee, or we shall not escape from Absalom. Make haste to depart, lest he overtake us suddenly, and bring disaster upon us, and strike the city with the edge of the sword. And the king's servant said to the king, we are your servants, ready to do whatever my lord the king commands. Then the king went out with all his household after him, but the king left 10 women concubines to keep the house. And the king went out with all the people after him and stopped at the outskirts. Then all of his servants passed before him, and all the Cherethites, all the Pelethites, and all the Gittites, 600 men who had followed him from Gath, passed before the king. So you can see here, Absalom is gaining his leadership in one way. He is, because make no mistake about it, just like Hitler was a leader, even though he had a bent moral compass and had no ethical base, doesn't mean that he didn't have influence, and leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing less. So we don't want to forget that. Absalom, though, he is gaining his leadership through deceit and treachery, and he's stealing it from another leader. This is never a healthy or a good idea. However, we can see here David, the way that when we read this passage about David, though, it's completely different. They say, we are your servants, ready to do whatever my lord the king commands. So even though Absalom has stolen quite a few of David's um, there's a I don't his people from his nation, from his land, David still has enough. He has such a command of the law of respect that he has this group of people that are still with him and are still looking up to him for that leadership and that guidance. So then the king said to Ittai the Gittite, "Why are you also going with us? Return and remain with the king, for you are a foreigner and also an exile from your own place. In fact, you came only yesterday. Should I make you wander up and down with us today, since I do not know where? Since I go, I know not where. Return and take your brethren back. Mercy and truth be to you." But Ittai said to the king, answered the king and said, "As the Lord lives, and as my lord the king lives, surely in whatever place my lord and king shall be, whether it be in death or life, even there also your servant will go." Now, we don't have a lot of the backstory on why why Ittai was there. However, we see very clearly the respect with which David had command over him. I guess that's probably not the best way to describe that in the context of what we're talking about here, but you can see how David's leadership level was so high that he was pulling Ittai up to him through the law of respect. And so David's like, you just literally just got here, and it'd be safer if you went somewhere else or you stayed with Absalom, because I don't know where I'm going. I'm running, and I don't know where I'm going to be tomorrow. I don't know where I'm going to be in an hour. So on and so forth. But Ittai, he can see the higher level of leadership within David than he sees within Absalom. And so maybe it's the stories he's heard, maybe David's reputation has gone before him. People just recognize his level of leadership, but we see that Ittai is going to stay with him. So David said to Ittai, "Go and cross over." Then Ittai the Gittite and all the men and all the little ones who were with him crossed over, and all the country wept with a loud voice, and all the people crossed over. The king himself also crossed over from the brook Kidron, and all the people crossed over towards the way of the wilderness. So you can see here this says and all the country wept. I'm not sure what that means and what context that might fall into. However, when you see a leader moving in the way that David's having to move here, we see there's a lot of emotional stuff that goes along with that, because people are very tied to that leader on an emotional level. There was Zadok also, and all the Levites with him, bearing the ark of the covenant of God, and they set down the ark of God, and Abiathar went up until all the people had finished crossing over from the city. Then the king said to Zadok, "Carry the ark of God back into the city. If I find favor in the eyes of the Lord, he will bring me back and show me both it and his dwelling place. But if he says thus, I have no delight in you, here I am, let him do to me as seems good to him." The king also said to Zadok the priest, "Are you not a seer? Return to the city in peace, and your 2 sons with you, Ahimaaz your son, and Jonathan the son of Abiathar. See, I will wait in the plains of the wilderness until word comes from you to inform me whether Zadok and Abiathar carried the ark of God back to Jerusalem." And they remained there. So David went up by the ascent of the Mount of Olives and wept as he went up, and he had his head covered and went barefoot. And all the people who were with him covered their heads and went up, weeping as they went up. Then someone told David, saying, "Ahithophel is among the conspirators with Absalom." And David said, "O Lord, I pray, turn the counsel of Ahithophel into foolishness." You can hear David is exemplifying several things. He's going the way. He's showing his people what to do. He's climbing. He's says here that he let me get the passage again here so I can. So they climbed the Mount of Olives and wept as they went, and he had his head covered and he went barefoot. So he's just showing this immense respect for God. The idea of walking barefoot is the idea of holy ground, and he's really just showing his respect for God here. And then you see all the people are coming up behind him, modeling his behavior. And that's one of the things that leaders do. We model behavior that we want our followers to exemplify and to repeat and to model for their people as well. So we see David doing a lot of things here. It says, now it happened when David had come to the top of the mountain where he worshipped God, there was Hushai the Archite coming down to meet him with his robe torn and dust on his head. David said to him, if you go on with me, then you will become a burden to me. But if you return to the city, say to Absalom, I will be your servant, O king, as I was your father's servant previously. So I will now also be your servant. Then you may defeat the counsel of Ahithophel for me. And do you not have Zadok and Abiathar the priests there with you? Therefore, it will be that whatever you hear from the king's house, you shall tell Zadok and Abiathar the priests. Indeed, they have there with them their two sons, Ahimaaz and Zadok's son, and Jonathan, Abiathar's son. And by them you shall send me everything you hear. So Hushai, David's friend, went to the city, and Absalom came into Jerusalem. Really just a powerful story about how David is forced out of the city of Jerusalem, and Absalom takes over as he tries to take over the entire country here. And again, all throughout here, you can see the people that are loyal to David and how he's modeling behavior and how he commands such respect for them that they're doing things that would basically be crazy. He's putting a spy in place. He's putting multiple spies in place in the city so that he knows what's going on in the city and people. And Absalom is not a stupid guy. He's obviously figured out how to command the spirits of the majority of the people and get David kicked out. So we see these people are putting their lives at great risk because Absalom is going to be looking for spies. He's going to be looking for people that are going to report to David. And he's going to be looking eventually to kill David because he wants to take over the entire kingdom by force, by a coup. And so these people have to have an immense amount of respect for David just to go through with the things that he's asking in these particular cases here. We're going to go over to the New Testament, and we're going to look at the law of respect through how Jesus modeled it. So we're first going to go to Colossians chapter 1. Colossians chapter 1, and we're going to look at verses 13 through 20. Colossians chapter 1, verses 13 through 20. And it says, He has delivered us from the power of the darkness and conveyed us into the kingdom of the Son of His love, in whom we have redemption through His blood and forgiveness of His sins. He is the image of the invisible God and firstborn over all creations. For by Him all things were created that are in heaven and that are on the earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or dominions or principalities or powers, all things were created through Him and for Him. And He is before all things, and in Him all things consist. And He is the head of the body, the church, who is the beginning, the firstborn from the dead, that in all things He may have the preeminence. For it pleased the Father that in Him all the fullness should dwell, and by Him to reconcile all things to Himself by Him, where these things on earth or things in heaven, having made peace through the blood of the cross. So we're looking at the law of respect here, and so this passage here this is talking about Christ, and this message is Paul is sharing with the Colossians about Christ and His leadership and it's kind of like, why should we respect this leader? And Paul is talking to Christians, and it says in chapter 1 verse 2, it says, to the saints and faithful brethren in Christ that are at Colossae. So he is talking to He is talking to people that are faithful to Christ already, and he's just rebuilding in their mind the why they should respect Christ and his leadership. We have one of the challenges as a Christian that we face is that we are so distant from the time that Christ happened that we don't actually get to see Christ like in the flesh and to witness the miracles that they would have seen potentially during their lifetime, or at least heard about from people that had seen, so much closer to the time that things happen. We don't have that, and so Paul is building up this image in this passage here, and these are here written for us, so that they will build us and our belief and our trust and our respect for Christ. Because being so distant from those actual events in that timeline, sometimes you lose sight of the high level of a leader that Christ was. And everybody refers to him, yeah, he was a great leader. We all just kind of head bob and acknowledge that that's true. Why is it true? Have we examined why it's true? How can we make that more true in our lives? How can we increase our respect for Christ? How can we gain a better understanding so that when we read through his words and we see things that we disagree with, or we have sin in our life because we've chosen not to fully engage with Christ, that we will have a tendency to look up to him more and respect him more, and all of a sudden those little tiny things that we think aren't that big a deal, we can get under control because we're following that leader and we're recognizing just how great a leader Christ was. Let's look over at Hebrews chapter 1. We'll read here in Hebrews chapter 1 and verses 1 through 12. Again, we're wanting to look at things through the eyes of Christ as a leader. God, who at various times and in various ways spoke in time past to the fathers by the prophets, had in these days spoken to us by his Son, whom he has appointed heir of all things, through whom also he made the worlds, who being the brightness of his glory and the express image of his person, and upholding all things by the word of his power, when he had himself purged our sins, sat down at the right hand of the majesty on high, having become so much better than the angels, as he has by inheritance obtained a more excellent name than they. For to which of the angels did he ever say, that's saying God, you are my son, today I have begotten you? And again, I will be to him a father, and he shall be to me a son. But when he again brings firstborn in the world, he says, let all the angels of God worship him. And of the angels he says, who makes his angels spirits, and his ministers a flame of fire. But to the Son he says, your throne, O God, is forever and ever. A scepter of righteousness is the scepter of your kingdom. You have loved righteousness and hated lawlessness. Therefore, God, your God, has appointed you with the oil of gladness more than your companions. And you, Lord, in the beginning laid the foundations of the earth, and the heavens are the work of your hands. They will perish, but you remain, and they will grow old like a garment. Like a cloak you will fold them up, and they will be changed, but you are the same, and your years will not fail. Again, we're painting the picture here of the law of respect, and it's being painted in this particular case by God himself. These are passages that are attributed to, this is what God is saying about Christ as he's lifting him up and building up that law of respect in our eyes. So the last passage we're going to go over today is Hebrews chapter 3, verses 2 through 5. Hebrews chapter 3, verses 2 through 5. It says, who was faithful to him who appointed him, as Moses was also faithful in all his house? For this one has been counted worthy for more glory than Moses, insomuch as he who built the house has more honor than the house. For every house is built by someone, but he who built all things is God. And Moses indeed was faithful in all his house as a servant, for a testimony of those things which would be spoken afterward. Here we see a little bit of a comparison between Christ and Moses here. Moses was a leader that was well respected by all of the Jews. This would have been a message that they would have been very receptive to and made the correlation very quickly because Moses was simply revered. They had been following the Old Testament law for thousands of years at this point before Christ came into the world. And so they had a very deep understanding of who Moses was, and he was just a well-respected leader, not only by man, but by God, as he was appointed by God. And then we see how this correlation is made here, how Jesus is much greater than Moses. And so again, we're seeing that painting of the law of respect, how, we tend to follow leaders is people naturally follow leaders stronger than themselves. So we naturally follow leaders that are stronger than ourselves. And so for these last three passages, we've seen this picture painted of leaders that are being painted that are stronger than their followers. So Christ is being built up so that people will naturally have that respect for him. So that's those are the passages that we're going to cover with the law of respect today. I hope you have a little bit of a better understanding of how the law of respect works. Like I said, people naturally follow leaders stronger than themselves. This is kind of a natural tendency, like we discussed at the very beginning of this. We all gravitate towards people that are stronger, faster, better, smarter, whatever that little thing is in your mind, that how you tend to kind of categorize that in your mind. We all tend to gravitate to that. And so as leaders, we want to build a foundation that is strong and that is worthy of that type of respect and that type of following. Like I said, we cannot deny that Hitler was a great leader. He had massive amounts of influence. He took over a huge chunk of the world for a period of time. And you can't do that without influencing people. And I know nobody wants to talk about that, and I'm not framing him in a good light at all because his moral compass was bent. It was really broken. He just didn't have nothing good. As far as his leadership and what he was doing in Germany at that particular time. There are some things that he did really well. He had some good motivations for what he was doing. He just chose to go about it in a way that was very, very unethical, and that as a leader just isn't that cool. And so, we want to make sure that we have this foundation that is worthy of that respect, so that when people are looking to us, we want them to look up, and we want them to look up with respect, not from power and might and strength, but we want them to look up in respect to us because of the journey that we've traveled and how we hold tight to our values and our mission and our vision. So I just wanted to share that with you today. I hope that you have gotten something from this and you've learned a little bit more about the Bible and what it means and how the laws of leadership are entwined in so many areas of the Bible. You'll notice we danced all over the place today with your Old Testament and New Testament. And we gathered passages from both, and we could look at characters from both books of the Bible and see just how the Bible has painted that picture. And leadership is interspersed all throughout the Bible. And we ended on Christ, of course, because he is the consummate and the ultimate leader that we has ever modeled leadership for us in our lives and ever will. So it's important that we stay in the Word. And that brings us to focusonchrist.com, quite frankly, because on focusonchrist.com, If you go over there, you'll find all sorts of tools and resources to help you keep your eyes focused on Christ every single day. That's my goal for you. That's why I do what I do. That's why I communicate. That's why I have the business that I have, is because I want to help you to have your eyes focused on Christ every single day. Every aspect of your daily walk needs to be focused on Christ. And that's not a stretch. That's not something that's way out there. That is something that is totally possible for you and for me every single day. I won't even say it takes work. I won't even say it takes work. It takes a habit. It takes persistency and it takes consistency, yes. But over on focusonchrist.com, I've got some really simple tools and resources that are going to help you do that if you choose to take that action in your life. Also, if you haven't been over to our Facebook page or our Instagram page, please check it out and get on our podcast. Subscribe to our podcast so that you can get these on a regular basis every time we release them. That way you'll get notified. So anyway, I hope this helps. I hope it added some value in your day to day, and I hope you know a little bit more about the law of respect. I can't wait to talk to you guys next time. God bless.